Hello, my friends. I want to spin here the last little bit of the program with you on actually the practical ways to deal with the crime problem in the country because it can be done. You know, when Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York City, he actually launched a significant crackdown on crime that Mike Bloomberg continued, and New York was safe until they elected the communist Bill de Blasio, and crime started going through the roof. There's a recurring pattern in this country when it comes to dealing with crime, and that is very simply that white progressives do not like to acknowledge crime. To solve crime in this country, you cannot leave it in the hands of people who think trans women are women because they're not grounded in reality. And progressives are not grounded in reality. So they're not capable of dealing with crime. Democrats have time and time again been bad on crime, weak on crime, soft on crime, lenient to criminals because it is their philosophical composition to not recognize crime because progressives are convinced that we are all blank slates and we can all be good. Society can sing kumbaya and cure us of our predilections. The problem is, as every Christian in this country knows, we're all born sinners and we live in a fallen world. And if you're willing to recognize that we are inherently sinners and bad, you can start dealing with crime. And one of the best ways to deal with crime is known as the broken window theory. Now, right now, one of you is reaching for your keyboard or the phone to call or to type and tell me the broken window theory of crime has been discredited. Except in real world use, it was never discredited. It was a philosophical project of progressives to discredit the broken window theory of crime. The broken window theory of crime has worked in every city it's ever been implemented in. The statistics are there. Lies, damn lies, and statistics, but you got the statistics that show it. You got the data that shows it. You have the real world evidence of the cities that used it that no longer do, that where you no longer feel safe. Washington, D.C. is one of those. New York City is another. The broken window theory of crime is very simple. You enforce aggressively the laws on the lesser crimes, and it stops the major crimes from happening. It's called the broken window theory because if you see a vacant building and a window is broken, and that window remains broken for a prolonged period of time, it's a sign to the criminals that the building is abandoned. And the criminals move into the abandoned building, take it over, and set up shop. And the petty thieves are over time replaced by the drug dealers, over time replaced by the ardent gang members, and the crime gets more and more violent. When Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, a former federal prosecutor, embraced the broken window theory of crime. And what happened? His city went after the small crimes. So they went after the abandoned buildings that were in bad shape. They forced them to either be torn down so you could not hide inside them or to get them fixed in ways that suggested people were actively monitoring the buildings. Mike Bloomberg randomly stopped and frisked people. He was attacked as a racist because it happened to be deployed in parts of the city that were predominantly black. What Mike Bloomberg argued, successfully in court, I might add, was that he wasn't targeting the black community. He was targeting where pockets of crime were. And guess what? When they randomly deployed stop and frisk in those areas, crime went down. Progressive white people want to make themselves feel better by screaming racism about everything. And law enforcement, because it disproportionately targets criminals, and a lot of criminals happen to be in the black community, they'll guess what? Guess who gets arrested? Young black men. Remember when the left went nuts over anti-Asian violence after the white guy in Atlanta shot up a brothel because he was a sex addict and convinced himself killing the prostitutes in the Asian-themed massage parlor would cure him of his sex addiction. They were like, oh, there's anti-Asian hate from all these white people. We got to stop it. The moment the data showed it was young black men who were causing the problem, they shut down the whole stop anti-Asian hate. Progressives, burdened by their white guilt, see the disproportionate failures in the black community with crime and think, well, this is racism to stop it. But what's really going on here is that the reason a lot of urban communities, not just black communities, but poor white communities in parts of the country as well, have failed is because of progressive policies. And progressives can't recognize, can't acknowledge, and can't admit that their policies failed the black community and the poor white community in Appalachia and in the Rust Belt. And so instead, they scream racism and they scream all sorts of malarkey about meanness of government and meanness of law enforcement. You want to crack down on crime? Use the broken window theory of crime. Start forcing landlords with derelict buildings to either fix them up or tear them down. Go into the slums and tear down the houses that are in shambles. Clear out the lots so there's nowhere for the criminals to hide. Enforce criminal laws when it comes to jaywalking. Enforce vehicular laws when it comes to broken lights, missing tags, blocking the box at intersections. Enforce those. Rudy Giuliani would have police officers at every intersection in Manhattan during rush hour traffic. If you block the box, that is, you know how the square is formed at the intersection where the lanes are going in opposite directions. Blocking the box meant you would roll into that intersection, the light would turn red, and you were stuck, and now the traffic couldn't proceed. He had police officers at every intersection in New York City with a book of tickets. And the moment you blocked the box and the light changed, they rushed out. They wrote you a ticket. And guess what? People stopped blocking the box and traffic could proceed. Law enforcement could proceed. Ambulances could proceed. Fire trucks could proceed because you weren't causing gridlock anymore. They blocked the box. You got gridlock. They forced you, gave you a ticket when you did it. Suddenly it went away, and the police were able to proceed in the city quicker. And then they started enforcing all the other laws. They cracked down on the small petty larcenies. They cracked down on the shoplifting. They cracked down on all those things. And guess what? Murders went down. Burglaries went down. Rapes went down. Why? Because if you were cracking down on the petty thieves, the big thieves didn't have a chance to get a foothold in the city. It wasn't hard. It was difficult at first because you had to have buy-in from a community of progressives who were convinced that it was all racist. And guess what happened? It got so successful and lowered crime so much, the progressives, never one with a sense of history, forgot. And so they stopped doing it, and crime came back. It's going to take time for the progressives to call themselves liberals again and the liberals to realize you got to take policing seriously. But you and your community, you don't have to do like the progressives. In my morning piece on my Substack and on social media, I put up the map. You can see it on my Instagram page at EW Erickson on Instagram. I put up the quadrants of Washington, D.C. If you overlay where all the murders in 2024 are to the demographics of the city, what you find is that overwhelmingly the murders are happening in areas that are overwhelmingly black. It's not racist to point it out. It's the truth. And the truth is also that progressives have decided law enforcement is discriminatory. And so they would rather the black mothers and black fathers of Washington, D.C., and Atlanta, Georgia, and New York City, and Chicago, Illinois, be without their kid who gets gunned down than keep their kids safe. God forbid we send in the police to crack down on an area. God forbid we get the police to do their jobs. No, so that white progressives can sleep at night. The poor sections of communities, overwhelmingly black, they must be crime infested. As long as the crime stays in the poor black area of town, the white progressives sleep well at night because they don't get to see it. They don't have to see it. They don't have to hear it. They don't have to know about it. They don't have to deal with it. So they can say with a straight face, I live in the city and there's no crime. You don't live in the city. You live in the fancy part of the city. You live in the fancy community. You live in the upper west side. You live in the Ward 3 in Washington, D.C. You live in Buckhead in Atlanta. You don't have to deal with the violence. You don't have to deal with the crime on a regular basis because you don't see it, because you don't live there. You're protected in your community. But what about the poor family, the poor white family, the poor black family, the poor Hispanic family that lives in an area where the criminals have invaded because property is cheap, people don't keep it up, and they've invaded the abandoned houses and turned them into gangland headquarters. Tear those houses down, you get rid of their headquarters. Make people cut the grass in their yards, enforce those laws. The neighborhood looks good. The property values go up. You price the criminals out of the neighborhood. This isn't hard stuff. It just takes the will to be hated by progressives to do it. And then there's something else you can do, and this is the hard part. You can build relationships with local police. My buddy John King, he's the insurance commissioner, Georgia. He's running for the U.S. Senate. He stepped back from that race. Didn't get the traction he hoped for. He's going to run again for insurance commissioner. He's a fantastic insurance commissioner. I wish him well, gladly supporting his reelection for insurance commissioner in the state of Georgia. He was a beat cop in Atlanta. Told me the story that back in the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, you know what his job was as a beat cop in Atlanta? He had to walk Coretta Scott King to the church and get her home at night. Think about that. The widow of Martin Luther King Jr., living in Atlanta near Ebenezer Baptist Church, had to be escorted by a police officer at night because the gangbangers didn't care about who she was. They couldn't have cared less. So she needed police to protect her in her own community. An iconic woman married to a martyr of the civil rights movement. The gangbangers couldn't have cared less. And yet the white progressives, they think we got to leave that community to police its own and take care of its own. We can't bring in the white police officers. No, you bring in the white police officers, the Hispanic police officers, the black police officers, and you build relationships in the community. You get to know each other. You do local law enforcement, community policing. When I was on my city council, there was an area of my community that is notoriously the worst area in the city. You don't go to it. The police don't like to go to it. The police actually got a grant to allow police to live in the neighborhood, and the argument was you move police into the neighborhood, guess what's going to happen? You're going to make the neighborhood safer. The police didn't want to live in the neighborhood. That's how crime-ridden the neighborhood was. But you know what the neighborhood had? It had a bunch of abandoned houses. The city didn't want to tear down the houses because some of the owners were non-white, and that would have been racist. So the abandoned houses stayed more and more derelict. The gang members moved in, and the gang members fixed them up. Squatting in the houses became gangland central. Had they gone in and torn down the houses, the gangs wouldn't have been able to take root. Had they deployed more community policing, if they could have kept people safer. There are ways to fight crime. And you know the number one way that you fight crime in this country? You don't vilify the police. They're willing to put their life on the line so that you have a safer community. There are bad cops. There certainly are. There are bad doctors. There are bad lawyers. There are bad police officers. We live in a fallen world. Of course there are. But also, the people who are out there putting their lives on the line to keep your community safe, you don't vilify them. And the left loves to vilify cops, and it's demoralizing to the police. You don't demoralize the police. You don't discredit the police. You let them actually police. You're going to make your community safer. It's actually not rocket scientists. No, we don't need more social workers in these communities. We actually do need more police in these communities.